Somewhere inside your body, ancient code is still running. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. Fragments of DNA inherited from a human population that vanished 40,000 years ago are still active inside millions of people alive today. And that should not be possible. For most of the last century, Neanderthals were framed as a failed branch of humanity, too primitive, too isolated, too doomed to survive once modern humans entered Eurasia. Then ancient DNA arrived and quietly destabilized everything. Because what the genome revealed was deeply unsettling. Neanderthals did not completely vanish. Part of them crossed into another population and continued forward through time inside us. This was not a clean extinction. Under enough pressure, extinction itself starts behaving differently. A population can disappear physically while surviving genetically inside another large enough to carry fragments of it forward. Maybe Neanderthals did not fail evolution at all. Maybe they became part of the only survival network large enough to outlast the Ice Age. Tell us where you're watching from, and what do you think actually kept humans alive? Strength, cooperation, or something far more fragile hidden inside the connections between populations? For decades, Neanderthals existed in popular imagination like evolutionary cautionary tales, primitive, heavy-browed, slowly fading while modern humans inherited the future. But the archaeological evidence never sat comfortably inside that version of the story. Neanderthals survived Eurasia for hundreds of thousands of years, far longer than modern civilization has existed. They hunted dangerous Ice Age megafauna at close range, managed fire in unstable climates, and adapted to glacial winters that would kill most modern humans within days. This was not a weak species. And yet, beneath that resilience, ancient DNA revealed something deeply fragile. Some groups were astonishingly small, entire regional reproductive networks consisting of only a few thousand individuals spread across enormous, fragmented territories. Once populations become that thin, extinction begins long before the final death. A harsh winter matters more. A failed migration matters more. The system loses redundancy, and the mathematics of survival begin running the wrong direction. One genome from Siberia showed signs of parents as genetically close as half-siblings, not because Neanderthals lacked social complexity, but because their populations may already have been dangerously isolated. And isolation under Ice Age pressure is mathematically lethal. When environments destabilize faster than populations can reconnect, extinction stops being dramatic. It becomes arithmetic. Then another human system entered Eurasia. Not superior, not invincible, but organized differently. Early Homo sapiens were also vulnerable populations operating near survival thresholds, their numbers possibly dropping below 10,000 individuals at several points during prehistory. That is not scarcity. That is a species approaching demographic collapse. Yet archaeological evidence suggests these populations possessed one critical advantage: connectivity. Stone tools traveled farther than any single group's territory. Shell ornaments appeared hundreds of kilometers from the nearest coastline. Knowledge moved between groups more efficiently, and that changes survival probabilities enormously because isolated populations break under pressure while connected populations absorb it. Then came the contact zones. Somewhere across the Levant, Central Asia, and Eastern Europe, modern humans entered territories Neanderthals had occupied for hundreds of thousands of years, and they did not meet just once. The genome makes that impossible. They met repeatedly, sometimes cautiously, sometimes violently, sometimes intimately. Ancient DNA now shows that nearly all modern humans outside Africa carry Neanderthal ancestry. Not enough to suggest full absorption, but enough to prove the reproductive boundary between the groups was incomplete. Children were born carrying blended ancestry into an Ice Age world already under immense pressure. And suddenly, extinction no longer looks simple. Because if populations are reproducing together and overlapping territorially for thousands of years, disappearance may not mean replacement at all. It may mean merger. But the genetic story becomes far stranger once researchers asked a dangerous question. If humans inherited Neanderthal DNA, why did they keep it? Evolution is ruthless with useless biology. Yet, certain Neanderthal sequences remained remarkably persistent inside modern populations, especially around immune response, skin adaptation, fat metabolism, and cold environment survival systems. This was not random inheritance, it was selection. Neanderthals had spent hundreds of thousands of years adapting to Eurasian pathogens before Homo sapiens arrived. When modern humans entered these territories, the populations carrying Neanderthal-derived immune variants survived infections more often, reproduced more successfully, and over thousands of years, those advantages accumulated inside the gene pool. Under enough environmental stress, hybridization itself may become adaptive, not romantic, but functional, a biological survival response emerging at the edge of demographic collapse. But the inheritance came with costs. Some Neanderthal DNA disappeared rapidly after entering modern human populations, especially around male fertility and neurological development. The two lineages were compatible enough to reproduce, yet different enough that evolution continued editing the merger for thousands of years afterward. Humanity today may be carrying the surviving fragments of an ancient genetic negotiation that lasted far longer than any civilization we have ever built, and we still do not fully understand what was lost during that process. The deeper genomic evidence expanded, the less human evolution resembled a clean family tree. Instead, it began looking like overlapping migration systems, repeatedly colliding, separating, and reconnecting under Ice Age pressure. Neanderthals were not alone. Denisovan DNA appeared across Asia and Oceania. Ghost populations emerged mathematically inside modern genomes, even where no fossils have ever been found. Some ancient lineages may survive today, only as statistical echoes hidden inside living human DNA. Extinction may not always erase a population completely. Sometimes it redistributes fragments into larger survival systems capable of carrying them forward, not as memory, not as culture, but as biology. The pressure during the late Ice Age was enormous. Glacial instability transformed Eurasian ecosystems repeatedly. Migration corridors narrowed, habitats fragmented into disconnected survival zones. For isolated populations, these changes were catastrophic. But connected systems absorb collapse differently. One local population disappears, and another inherits its survivors. Knowledge transfers, genes transfer. The network survives even while individual groups vanish. Perhaps that was the true difference emerging between Neanderthal populations and expanding Homo sapiens networks, not intelligence, not strength, but scale of connectivity. A difference invisible to the human eye, but written permanently inside the genome. One of the most haunting discoveries came from a human jawbone found in Romania. The individual known as OACE1 lived around 40,000 years ago and carried extraordinarily high Neanderthal ancestry, not distant ancestry, but recent. One Neanderthal relative may have lived only 4 to 6 generations back, because suddenly these populations are no longer abstract prehistoric categories. They overlap inside families. Children with blended genomes may have grown up in territories where both human groups still existed simultaneously, in a world without names for what they were. The final centuries of Neanderthal existence may not have resembled cinematic extinction at all in some regions, more like gradual absorption through repeated contact and demographic merging, driven by the raw logic of survival. Once populations begin merging repeatedly, the logic of extinction shifts permanently. The individuals disappear. The lineage continues. But even hybridization could not fully reverse the demographic pressures building across Eurasia. Neanderthal populations kept shrinking. Connectivity kept weakening. And eventually, many regional reproductive systems fell below recovery thresholds, reaching a point where survival no longer meant preserving a separate population. It meant transferring fragments forward by any pathway still available. Perhaps that is what Neanderthal DNA really represents, not failure, not a footnote, but a final migration into another species at the very edge of disappearance. But survival through absorption carries an unsettling implication. Modern humans rarely confront honestly. Humanity prefers stories with clean winners. Ancient DNA destroyed that simplicity permanently. Modern humans are not genetically isolated beings, standing untouched at the end of evolution. We are composites. Fragments of extinct populations still move through modern bodies because extinction itself was incomplete. How many populations vanished while partially surviving inside others? How many human groups were erased culturally while remaining biologically present inside the gene pools of populations that replaced them? Some researchers now suspect entire populations survive only as faint mathematical signals inside modern genomes. No skeletons, no names, no memory, only traces. And this creates an uncomfortable mirror for today. Because civilization also depends on connectivity, trade routes, food systems, energy networks. Under stable conditions, these structures feel permanent, self-sustaining, too large to fail. But Ice Age Eurasia suggests survival systems become fragile precisely when fragmentation accelerates beyond the speed at which populations can reconnect. The Neanderthals may not have disappeared because they were less intelligent. They may have disappeared because their network became too thin to absorb cascading pressure, and there is something deeply modern about that realization. Even now, Neanderthal DNA continues behaving unevenly inside living populations. Some inherited variants influence immune responses. Others affect skin barrier formation, fat storage, altitude adaptation, pain sensitivity, and circadian rhythm regulation. The body remembers environments civilization has long forgotten, carrying biological instructions optimized for Ice Age survival inside people who have never seen a glacier. And the inheritance is not entirely beneficial. Some Neanderthal-derived immune adaptations now appear linked to autoimmune disorders in modern environments. The same biological responses that once protected prehistoric humans from Eurasian diseases may now contribute to inflammatory conditions under completely different ecological pressures. The Ice Age is not fully gone inside us. Parts of it remain active, expressed, still running in bodies that have no memory of where those instructions originally came from. And yet the deeper researchers push into ancient DNA, the more incomplete the picture becomes. Ancient African population history may be vastly more complex than current models can reconstruct, because DNA preservation in tropical environments is far more difficult. The closer science moves toward human origins, the less stable the narrative becomes, and the more human evolution begins to resemble not progress, but weather. Population systems colliding, mixing, collapsing, and reforming across landscapes that never stayed still long enough for any single group to call permanent. Perhaps that is why the Neanderthal story unsettles people so deeply. It forces humanity to confront how narrow survival margins actually are. For most of human existence, extinction was not the exception, it was the background condition. Entire populations disappeared constantly, erased by a migration failure, one epidemic, one generation with too few surviving children. The threshold between continuation and collapse was never as wide as we imagine looking backward. Modern civilization creates the illusion that large populations are automatically secure, but demographic systems remain fragile in ways that scale and technology do not fully protect against. Connectivity still matters. Redundancy still matters. The Ice Age simply exposed these dynamics more brutally, stripping away every buffer until nothing remained between populations and the raw arithmetic of survival. The Neanderthals survived Eurasia for hundreds of thousands of years. Then, slowly, almost invisibly, their reproductive networks became too fragmented to stabilize not through one catastrophe, not through one defeat, but through accumulated pressure arriving from too many directions at once, faster than any remaining connection could absorb it. Today, fragments of Neanderthal DNA continue moving silently through modern civilization, through hospitals, airports, cities, and families' ancient biological memory traveling through human bodies across a planet that has no idea it is carrying it. The species once imagined as a primitive evolutionary failure did not disappear completely into the past. Part of them entered the future, not through conquest, not through dominance, but through contact. Through shared survival under conditions neither population was built to face alone. The deeper ancient DNA reaches into human origins, the less humanity resembles a singular species marching cleanly through history. Instead, we begin to look like the temporary outcome of overlapping survival systems, continuously merging, collapsing, and redistributing across unstable environments. A fragile continuity assembled from populations most of us will never know. And modern civilization may not stand outside those same dynamics at all. Our survival systems also depend on connectivity, food networks, energy infrastructure, social coordination, biological resilience. They feel permanent because we are living inside them, the same way Ice Age populations felt inside the systems surrounding them, right before fragmentation began breaking the connections, holding everything together. The Neanderthal story is not really about the past. It is about how extinction can begin invisibly, long before the final moment anyone would call an ending, and how humanity itself may only persist for as long as its networks remain connected enough to absorb the next shock. If this journey into prehistoric survival systems stayed with you, subscribe to Prehistoric Shadows, not for certainty, but for the possibility that beneath human history, older patterns are still moving quietly beneath our feet.